Okay, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. This is the Better Utah Institute's legislative preview webinar, and we're so excited to have you here. I love hosting this event every year, and I'm grateful for the panelists who have joined us from different organizations who you will meet soon. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Chase Thomas. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor with Better Utah Institute. Better Utah Institute is a nonprofit organization that focuses on educating Utahns on issues of public concern and increasing civic engagement. This is a really busy time of year for us with the legislative session. Lots of things going on, lots of issues to discuss. And so I won't keep you waiting. We'll get into the webinar and start discussing all those issues. I want to thank Nat Williams, Marina Lowe, Piper Christian, and Bonnie Billings for joining us. And I guess to get us started, would you each take a little bit to introduce yourselves, your organization, and what you focus on? We will start with Piper.
Hi, thanks, Chase. My name is Piper Christian. I'm the Climate and Air Quality Policy Associate at Stewardship, Utah. And our organization focuses on protecting the air, water, and climate through elections, policy, and democracy. So yeah, excited to be chatting with you all today.
Great, thank you for joining. Bonnie?
I'm Bonnie Billings. I'm with the Utah Education Association. We are the professional association and union for our public school educators and teachers in Utah. And we focus on making sure that we are the voice for Utah teachers to provide quality education in our public schools.
Great, thank you. Marina.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Marina Lowe. I'm the policy director at Equality Utah. Equality Utah is the state of Utah's primary organization focused on LGBTQ rights. And we work primarily in two areas, education and then policy, working up at the Capitol and across the state to advance protections for Utah's LGBTQ community. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Nat?
Thanks, Chase. My name is Nat Williams, and I'm the Democracy Policy Associate at Stewardship, Utah. So I know Piper already had a chance to introduce a little bit about our organization. I think I'll just add some context that we're sort of a new organization, the result of a merger between the Real Utah Project and O2 Utah. And so now a little less than a year old. So thanks.
Thank you all. So we will jump into the legislative session. First, want to ask, so what issues or specific bills are you watching out for this session? I know that we've had, as of last night, 375 bills released. So if you have a specific bill, let us know, or just the general issues, good things, bad things, what's on your plate? Let's start with Marina.
Okay. Well, it's been the past couple of years have been really challenging, I would say, for the LGBTQ community and the trans community in particular. We've seen really 3 years of nonstop attacks and bills targeted on that community in particular, whether it be things like access to gender affirming healthcare, the ability to participate in school sports, access to sex segregated spaces, et cetera. And so we were kind of hoping for a quieter year, but alas, the Utah legislature never likes to do that and give us an easy year. So we are expecting some challenges. I'll highlight just a few things I know are coming our way. One of these has already been numbered. This is HB 77 being sponsored by Representative Trevor Lee. And this is a bill that I think probably Bonnie cares about as well. But I'll go ahead and talk about it here. This is a bill that would ban most prominently displayed flags in Utah's public school classrooms. And I say most because there are a few exemptions. Things like the United States flag would be allowed, the Utah flag, the flags of BYU and the University of Utah were also exempted. So I guess their lobbyists were quick to get involved on this bill. There are also exemptions for flags that have to do with curricula. but I think the clear intent of the legislation really is to target the display of pride flags in Utah's classrooms. We are particularly concerned with the enforcement provision in this bill, which would allow for parents to sue schools if they believe that there's a violation of the law. And that just, I think, really is problematic in terms of the likelihood of excessive litigation that we would see coming out of this. And just this really disturbing trend I think we've seen in the past number of years of creating really transforming our schools into battlegrounds where a lot of these culture wars are being waged. So we will be keeping our eye on that bill. There's also a situation that's been brewing up at Utah State University involving a trans resident advisor. And so we are understanding that there will likely be some legislation looking at how the legislature intends to resolve that issue. So we will be keeping our eye on that. The legal ground underneath us is actually sort of shifting as we speak on these issues. There was a bill passed at the federal level, the House of Representatives, that would sort of resolve this issue one way or another when it comes to the ability of trans girls to participate in sports or otherwise be in other sex segregated spaces, including dorms. And there's likely to be legislation introduced and to move quickly in the Senate as well, with the intention of getting it on Trump's desk very quickly after he takes office. And so the question of what the legislature does may end up being sort of moot if the federal government moves more quickly than even the legislature might. And then finally, I will say we are hearing whispers about a bill to be introduced in the House to, again, tinker with Utah sex education law. And so we will be keeping a close eye on that, as well as oftentimes there is real implications for the LGBTQ community whenever the legislature mucks around in that area of the law. So I will leave it there. Those are sort of the three things we're keeping our eye on that directly pertain to the LGBTQ community, but so many other issues that we know are on the legislature's target list this year that will impact all of us as Utahns and we care about as well at Equality Utah, including reproductive rights, voting, issues affecting our judiciary, higher education, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks.
Thank you, Marina. I know that before she retired, Representative Berkman was talking about a gender marker bill. Is that something that we can still expect from another lawmaker, or was that only her pet project?
I don't think so. And to be honest, I don't even think she was planning on running that. I think it was just talk on Twitter. But we are not expecting legislation in that area. But, obviously things can change.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you for all the great work that you do up on the Hill. You have a lot to cover.
Thank you.
Next, let's go to Bonnie. I know there's a lot to do with education every single year, hundreds of bills, and that doesn't even include the budget and education funding. So what are you all watching out for this year?
So we do have three sections that we're really kind of prioritizing what we're kind of looking at. And one is obviously the funding piece and the mechanism for public education. We do want to see at least a 3% increase in the WPU, so the weighted per pupil unit in public education. The governor's budget right now shows that's above inflation. So there is a mechanism that the WPUs increase based on inflation, that will be met in that statutory requirement. But we're hoping for a 3% increase above that. The governor's budget does show the increase, obviously, for the inflation. We're still working to kind of get up whatever that percentage piece, hopefully that 3%. Some positive things that we look at that seem to be really well liked by our membership, as well as have been getting good results at the legislature as well, is the increased paid professional hours for all licensed educators. That basically gives them some paid time beyond their contract hours to do prep and that kind of thing. That's been a very popular program and is expected to renew. Another one would be stipends for future educators. So people who are student teachers have not been paid in the past. And last year they started paying for those, a stipend for those student teachers. And so we're looking to keep that going as well. And that's also been a popular thing. So those are some really good ones that we're looking at. We do support the Healthy School Meals Initiative, and Representative Clancy has introduced his bill for that, which has our full support. We're excited about that. and establishing, sustainable and growing long-term revenue sources for public education. That's one that we always look at. Another one is our quality instruction and student equity. So making sure that we are preserving the ability for public employees to participate in labor unions. And that's one of the kind of threats that we're up against this year as well. We do anticipate a resurgence of or reintroduction of the House Bill 285 from the last session, which is the anti-labor union bill, which would prevent payroll deductions for membership dues. There's recertification requirements as well as access to public spaces, just basically things to make it harder for unions to exist for our public educators. We have been hearing that this year that bill is going to be back, and it's going to be back with a vengeance. So we are keeping our eyes open for that. We haven't seen it drop yet. We don't have a lot of information. Representative Tusher is expected to be behind that bill, and he has told some press that he's not excluding, or he's not targeting UEA, but he won't talk to us. So that's one of those things that we're kind of looking at. We're like, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we're not really sure what to expect. We're not sure if it's going to be all in one bill or if it's going to be in multiple bills. We're not sure. So until we see that bill, we're kind of just every day looking for it, seeing what's going to come down. But it really will, if it's one bill, if it's many bills, it's really going to affect our ability to represent our educators, our members. We serve 18,000 teachers and educators here in Utah. We are the most established voice for those educators. So it would be really unfortunate if that comes down and it passes this year. We're hoping that, and we have heard that it will, like I said, target UEA in particular. But eventually, if it does target UEA this year, it's going to go for all the other public unions at some point. So making sure we stick together in that piece. So that's kind of the biggest threat that we're looking at this year, but then also we want to make sure that we are preventing any additional funding that goes to unaccountable private school religious vouchers this year. So we're kind of keeping our eyes open for that to kind of see those kinds of things. Another thing that's a little bit less sexy or whatever on that is we are looking at to make sure that there's parity for educators by allowing entities in the state and school system to choose to absorb mandatory contributions for employees to the Tier 2 Utah retirement system. There's now two sections, Tier 1 and Tier 2, and there's not equity in that. Right now, those of our members who are in that Tier 2 retirement system, they have to pay a portion of their earnings to this retirement system. And so what this bill would do would be making it so the districts or the employers can opt into paying that percentage amount in those Tier 2 funds.
Great, thank you. You all have so many different issues to cover when it comes to education, so thank you so much for the work that you do up on the Hill. Let's go to Nat next. I know that there has been a lot of threats to democracy issues that have been bubbling up over the past year when it comes to our election system, judiciary. What do you have your eyes on as we approach the session?
Yeah, thanks, Chase. One thing that's top of mind right now is we're seeing a lot of signs from legislative leadership that they are going to maybe dramatically change our vote by mail system in Utah. Currently, anyone who's an active registered voter is mailed a ballot, and then you can choose to return that ballot either by mailing it back, by dropping it off in a drop box, or voting in person instead. Now, this bill hasn't dropped yet. We have heard rumors that Representative Burton may be carrying it, but the biggest threat we're worried about on this front is a bill that would require Utahns to return those mail-in ballots in person before Election Day while showing a government-issued ID. So this would be a dramatic change from our current system. This would affect all Utahns. Anyone who doesn't have a flexible schedule, maybe you work regular hours 9 to 5. You may work in a county outside of the county your residence is at where you vote. Maybe you have, childcare to consider. And especially for rural Utahns, I mean, we pursued a vote by mail policy in Utah to increase participation among rural voters, and we've made great strides. Participation just across Utah is up almost 30% since we started moving towards this policy. And rural Utahns will have the furthest to drive to polling places. Their polling locations often have the least resources. Maybe they're open less hours or less days. We see a couple other bills also that will be threatening vote by mail. Two of them are already filed. HB 205, which would get rid of our postmarked rule right now. So long as your bill is postmarked before Election Day, it can still arrive after and be considered timely cast ballot. And then also HB 213, which would require people to opt in to our vote by mail system. And that we just see that really is a step in the wrong direction, considering over 90% of Utahns use vote by mail every year. Multiple studies have corroborated that Utahns trust vote by mail. We have so many independent layers of security checks. So I'm happy to talk more about those bills in the Q&A, but I wanted to talk about one other big issue we're looking at, which is, of course, the right to our ballot initiatives. Many of you may have followed the Amendment D struggle over the last year, and know that legislators are looking at this to further restrict that right. We saw SJR2, which is a bill that was filed this year. It's been filed in previous years, but would take specifically tax-related ballot initiatives and require a 60% threshold in order for them to pass. So 60% of Utahns at the ballot need to approve that. And obviously, this dilutes the power of voters and people. And also, we worry that if we start carving out these, subject topical initiatives and requiring higher percentages, that we're just going to be removing that important check and balance on our legislature. So along with this is also, we saw the Utah judiciary be a really important backstop to protecting our democracy rights. And we worry the legislature will, again, try and maybe erode their ability to have their own check and balance on the legislature. No bills so far that I've seen have been filed for that yet, but rumors may suggest that our legislators are considering taking us to a partisan elected system, and that would be something that Montana is also considering right now after their Supreme Court ruled something to be unconstitutional by their legislators. But I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. A lot of attacks coming our way on vote by mail, and very interesting to see just yesterday, Sutherland Institute released a poll showing that over 80% of Utahns have trust in our election system as it is. So thank you for watching out for those bills. Piper, we'll go to you now. What bills are you looking out for, and what issues are you guys working on this session?
Thanks, Chase. So we are pushing a few bills and also keeping an eye out for some on defense. So we always try to target our legislation based on what is going to have the greatest emissions reductions per dollar spent or regulation enacted. And so first, we're going to do one focusing on heavy duty vehicles. So those semi trucks and dump trucks, other vehicles that are more than 14,000 pounds. They have a disproportionate impact on our air pollution, and particularly those older ones that were made before 2010 can emit up to 90% more particulate matter and 95% more NOx. So we thankfully have gotten a lot of federal funding for incentives for private vehicle owners to upgrade their vehicles to newer models. So we're just working currently on figuring out how to create maybe targeted incentives or regulations to expedite that process of getting folks into cleaner heavy-duty vehicles. Additionally, we are looking into a bill to address those who cheat on their emissions testing, because when that happens, those vehicles can emit up to 10 times more pollution than those who follow the rules. And then one that sometimes stumps people, but I'm really excited about, is we're working to address emissions from landscaping equipment. It turns out operating a traditional gas-powered lawnmower is equivalent emissions as driving from Logan to Las Vegas for 1 hour. So operating it for 1 hour. So they have really disproportionate impacts. And so we are hoping to address those emissions, particularly on state property. Next, we are looking into a bill to address emissions of bromine and chlorine. So back in a few years ago, there was a study that found that there were astronomically high emissions of bromine at US Magnesium, and that those emissions are potentially making our wintertime inversions 10 to 25% worse. So we are working on a bill that would address those emissions and could achieve a 75% reduction in those. So we're really excited about this bill. US Magnesium is not currently operating. They are on pause, but we think it's important to put in those kind of those emissions, new emissions regulations and requirements and technologies so that if or when they do open, they are good neighbors and don't emit too much to our airshed. And then we are also working on looking into opportunities to get more data on the emissions from mining trucks within the non-attainment area. And I apologize, it's a bit of a fire hose of bills. So happy to answer any questions about the specifics of these. And then on the defense side, last legislative session, we saw HB 502, Critical Infrastructure and Mining. This bill was limiting municipalities' authority to regulate mining activity in their jurisdiction. This bill was scaled back to a study bill last session, but we suspect that a bill will be coming back this session on this issue. While we recognize that our state is growing and we need gravel and aggregate for our roads, we think that more work needs to be done to ensure that the siting of those mines is done in a way that doesn't impact human health and the authority of communities. So that's one that we're keeping an eye on for this legislative session. Thanks.
Thank you. And as I'm staring out the window, I see air quality continuing to worsen and worsen. So thank you for the work that you're doing on all those bills. I just want to, as we're wrapping up this focus on bills and issues, I know that some of the organizations on this call, if not all of you, have bill trackers. You can go to your websites and learn more about the bills that you're following and to your social media. We also have one on our website. You can track legislation, Better Utah on the Hill. And I think we just had a link dropped in the chat. There's been 375 bills released already. I think we have a couple dozen on our bill tracker so far. They're just going to keep on coming. So it's a lot to take in, a lot to track. But thank you for all the work that you all are doing for your organizations up on the Hill. If anyone does have questions that they would like answered later during our Q&A session, please use the Q&A box. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. Type it in there and we'll get to questions later. Switching from specific issues and bills to how people can engage with the session. How best can interested Utahns engage with the legislative session on issues that they're concerned about, in your opinion? Let's start with Nat.
Thanks, Chase. We just had the central air turn on in here, so let me know if you can't hear me very well.
We can hear you great.
Great. Okay. So I want to highlight that our legislature's website is rated one of the top in the country. It's extremely easy to use and also has so much you can do on there. You can find who your legislators are from the homepage. You can create a free account and track bills yourselves and get email notifications as they move through the process. You can attend virtual committee hearings. Committee hearings are designed for public input, but sometimes people have a hard time getting to them. You're often only given 24 hours notice before a committee hearing. So that can be a really great option for anyone who, has a subject area they like. Maybe you really care about the environment, so you follow the House Natural Resources Committee. Go check out what bills they're following. Maybe jump in on a public hearing and you might learn some really interesting things. Sometimes I like to, just pop in and see what other bills are there, even though I'm only here for one bill. So really recommend fully using that tool that's available to you. It's a great website.
Bonnie?
Yeah, I want to echo what Nat said about using the state's website for sure. Obviously, like you said, Chase, all of us have ballot trackers. Most of us do have ballot trackers. I'm not able to put in the chat, but if you want to follow UEAs, it's myuea.org, and then you go to Under the Dome. You can see our bill tracker. You can uh, get daily emails. We do have a Tuesday webinar where we'll be updating things that happen throughout the week. As far as being on the Hill, if you are interested in testifying at any of the committee hearings, just my biggest advice is to just make sure that you're coming from a place of like storytelling. It's more impactful if you have an individual story that you can tell and make it really compelling that way.
Piper?
Yeah, thanks. I think two things. I think it can be useful to say what legislative district you're coming from, particularly if you are a constituent of someone sitting on that committee who is making a determination on the bill. I think that can always be useful to highlight. Additionally, as Nat mentioned, we have an award-winning legislative website, and for a lot of folks, these committee hearings happen in the middle of the workday and you can't make it up to the Capitol. Thankfully, there is a great way to attend those hearings virtually. So you could pop on for 5 or 10 minutes and testify and not have to take a bunch of time out of your day. So that's a really great resource that I always want to highlight.
Marina?
Oh, hard to go last on this one. Everybody's already given all the good suggestions. I guess what I would say without duplicating things that have already been shared is that I think there are hundreds and hundreds of bills introduced every year, and it can be sort of daunting to figure out which ones are important, which ones aren't. And so find an organization that represents the interests you care about to help do that weeding of the information for you. So any of our organizations, but there are other organizations not represented here today. If you care about reproductive rights, for example, you may want to follow Planned Parenthood, and they can help weed down the hundreds of bills to the few that might be of interest to you from a subject matter perspective. And then finally, I just want to put a plug out there also for getting to know your own individual representatives and senators. Utah has a part-time legislature, which means that our legislators, when the session is over, they go back into their communities and they interact with the people who live there in a way that you don't see happen on the federal level or in other states that have a full-time professional legislature. So reach out, ideally outside of session, and get to know your legislator, develop a relationship. If you have a particular area of expertise, share that with your legislator because they are hit with bills from a wide array of subjects and oftentimes need to rely on people in their circles who do have expertise, and you could be that person. So develop a relationship outside of the session, and then come January, it's much easier to pick up the phone, send an email, send a text, to be able to have your voice heard directly by your elected representative.
Thank you. Marina, I want to stay on you and talk about something that you brought up in your answer, connecting with an organization that we care about. How can people connect with Equality Utah, follow your work, and engage with you all during the session?
Yeah, so all of the typical social media channels are available. Follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on X. Our website is being redone actually as we speak, and I know that we're putting up a legislative tracker, or at least all of the bills that we'll be following throughout the session. I don't have that link right now, but I can get it to you, Chase. I see there's a question about it in the chat. But those are great ways to reach out to us. We are also on the Hill every day during the session. Please come up and find us if you want to chat about something in particular or want advice on how to manage a committee hearing or where the nearest bathroom is or vending machine, et cetera, et cetera. We're happy to help.
Great, thank you. Piper and Nat, I'll let y'all tag team this. How can people engage with Stewardship Utah and y'all during the session?
I can start us off here. So first, for anyone who wants to help protect vote by mail, I know Daniela and myself have put in the chat a little take action form. This is sort of a contact your legislator form. It'll go to your representatives, to the governor, to the lieutenant governor. It has some pre-filled talking points, but please feel free to edit those and share your personal experience. Legislators really need to hear that. Otherwise, social media at Stewardship Utah everywhere. On our, you can get on our email list. You can sign up for that on our website. And yeah, the website's just great. But Piper, go ahead.
Also wanted to plug that we have a volunteer sign-up form. So we have policy associates, in addition to Nat and I working on democracy and air quality and climate. We also have policy associates working on Great Salt Lake water issues as well as energy issues. So on our form, you can select what issues you're interested in following, and then we'll make sure to direct the right information to you.
Great, thank you. And Bonnie, how can people engage with UEA?
Well, like I said, myuea.org, you can go in there under the dome, find our bill tracker, and any ways to reach out to us are you can get daily emails and our weekly session update that we do on Tuesdays. Those are some really good opportunities. Also, we'll be at the Hill all day, every day as well. On Fridays, we do host Educator Day on the Hill, where we invite our members up to see what goes on up there, learn how to talk to their representatives. So we'll definitely be there every Friday. And one of the big things is going to be our social media channels. I think one of our big things that we're going to have to be working on our strategy with this labor bill is having a strong show of support from our members as well as from the public for this union. And so anytime you can share out any content about I am UEA, those kinds of things where we have our members engage on why the UEA is important to them would be really helpful if we can get engagement on those pieces.
Great, thanks. Before we get to the Q&A, and just as a reminder, if anybody has any questions, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom. The session can be a really stressful time. I know for lobbyists and those of us who live up on the Hill, extremely stressful, but even for people who are engaging from afar, watching the news, seeing the impacts that it's having on their lives, what is your best way to relax during the session? Let's start with Piper.
I think getting outside is pretty important. It's nice that the legislature or the Capitol is walking distance from City Creek Canyon. So between meetings, you'll probably catch me walking up there. And love to cross country ski up Mill Creek Canyon and elsewhere to let off some steam.
Love it. Bonnie?
Yeah, walking outside is really great. My other thing is to spend time with my animals. I have a new kitten. She's about 10 months old, so I definitely look forward on a stressful day of getting home and just hanging out with her.
Great. Marina?
I would echo the getting outside comment. One of the benefits to the legislature's amazing legislative website and the ability to connect remotely is that, you could maybe be on a hike and listening to a hearing if you don't have to be there in person. So that's one of my tips. I try to do that when I can. Um, and I just got for Christmas a mini mahjong set, which I will be bringing to the Capitol and playing with a group of friends when we have some downtime. So, connecting with friends, keeping my mind active, being outside, enjoying nature. Those are all the things I try to do.
Love it. Nat?
I think it's really important to not let your hobbies go during these stressful times, right? So I love to crochet, puzzle, read, anything that can get me away from screens, really. So yeah, I use that sort of as a litmus test. I'm like, okay, how am I doing if I haven't, had a chance to break into one of those recently? So.
Great, thank you all. I would also like to plug watching Parks and Recreation if you need an old TV show to watch. Reminds you that government can be funny and silly and not stressful and divisive all the time. I usually watch that every year. Um, so we're gonna go to Q&A. Um, start with Piper. When you're speaking about your proactive issues that you were working on, do you have any bills that have already been released with bill numbers, or is it something that we're watching out for to come?
Great question. So most of our bills are being drafted but have not yet been numbered and released. I can drop in the chat. Representative Clancy has released a bill addressing freight switcher emissions, and so that one has been numbered. I can drop that in so folks can see that and start to follow it. But if you sign up for our email list, we'd be happy to share once those bills are numbered so folks can track those.
Thank you. We have another question from Harold. Is there something that a constituent can do when a representative does not respond to questions? Is there anyone who would like to take that?
I can take a stab at that. So I would say, especially during the session, don't be dismayed if you don't get an answer from your representative because there's a chance that they saw it and that it is informing their opinion, but they just didn't have the time to respond. Or maybe each legislator has one intern during the session. So maybe an intern viewed your message, but didn't feel like they could respond. I wouldn't be too dismayed. It's still very important to do that. And especially if you time it strategically, before the committee hearings or before a floor vote, it's always worth in my mind to continue reaching out.
Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? No? Okay. I'm going to go back to Piper. Is there a bill that you know of being proposed that will copy other states in phasing out the use of plastic bags for groceries?
It's a great question. I am not aware of any addressing that issue.
Yeah, I think in the past we've had the opposite to where they have tried to ban bans on plastic bags. So not sure if we're going to see a ban again, but that's what we've made fun of in the past. Okay, we're going to go back to Nat. Um, what is given as the rationale for requiring voters to turn in their ballots in person? Is there any data showing that the rationale addresses reality?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is that there were some audits that came out recently that legislators are sort of misapplying data. And then also Elizabeth Hutchings, who is on this call and a part of Better Utah, wrote an excellent op-ed about those audits and about the rationales that our legislature is using. She put an excellent statistic in in the chat about just the instance of voter fraud in Utah, how it's absolutely minute and in no way justifies gutting a system that Utahns love, trust, use, understand, and has really increased participation in the state. So
Great, thank you. Not sure if this is also for Nat or anybody who would like to take it. HB 232, sponsored by Andrew Stoddard, would force parties to nominate either by signature gathering and primaries or by convention. Anyone have any thoughts?
I would be happy to take a stab at this. So this is a really interesting bill. For anyone who's familiar with SB 54 from 2014, it created two types of party systems in Utah. And this one sort of does a similar thing, Andrew Stoddard's bill, where it creates two types of parties that have to use the signature gathering method in order to make it to the primary ballot. And they can only use that. And then the other type of party is one that can use any other kind of nominating system, but they can't use signature gathering. They also can't be featured on the primary ballot. They go straight to the general. So this is really an effort to have the registered parties use this signature gathering path instead. And it also significantly reduces the number of signatures required, because as it is right now, many candidates actually go into debt to pay companies to be able to get the number of signatures required. And this might even take some money out of politics. So I think it's a really interesting bill.
Thank you, Nat. Bonnie, I'm going to give this one to you. Lorraine would like more info on the Healthy School Meals Bill, if you have any info on that.
Yeah, So it's House Bill 100 and is sponsored by Representative Clancy. And the bill establishes a program to provide free breakfast and lunch to eligible students. And it requires participation in the summer electronic benefits transfer program. So for students who qualify for free or reduced lunch, it would just qualify or give them breakfast and lunch for free, as well as programs during the summer to make sure that they are fed as well.
Great, thank you. From Jade, we have a question for anyone. Are there bills you can highlight that are related to making Utah more affordable for working class families? Anyone? I'm not sure if the lack of response is lack of bills that have been released yet or lack of focus on the issue. We will highlight any in our bill tracker as they come up. And so keep an eye out on Better Utah on the Hill page. We still expect hundreds more bills. I'm guessing probably at least 600, 700 more bills to be released over the course of the session. So stay tuned for a plethora of bills on different issues. I think Mary's question, where can we find all the bills that are being proposed at the initiative pro-democracy, pro-environment, pro-union, and the tribal organizations? I think that goes back to how can you, like following different organizations and their bill trackers. For pro-democracy, Stewardship Utah definitely has Nat covering pro-democracy issues and bills. Stewardship Utah is pro-environment, pro-union, Bonnie, and UBA, myuba.org. And there are also tribal representatives up on the Hill. You can follow different tribal nations or nonprofits that focus on tribal issues to find those bills as well.
Chase, can
Marina?
I offer another suggestion? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, going back to our legislative website, if you go to the page where there's sort of a general page that lists the 2025 legislation, and there's a drop down where you can select topic, which is another great way if you're particularly interested in, let's say, healthcare. You can select healthcare and you can see all the bills that have been filed so far dealing with healthcare, and then you can click through on each individual bill. It's just another way to sort of narrow down the focus if you know that you're interested in a particular topic area.
Great, thank you. It's a great website. So go in and poke around. It takes a little bit to find where everything is on the website, but once you understand how it works, it's really easy to find information, get involved. They have a lot of different resources on there. Piper, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, just wanted to highlight we have some great other nonprofits that are doing air quality and climate tracking. So while we're focusing on our kind of offense strategy with all these bills, we've delegated to Heal Utah and Utah Clean Energy to do air quality and climate legislative tracking. So I will drop the links to their legislative trackers in the chat.
Great, thank you. A question from David for Nat. I've heard there's a bill to reform the writing of ballot initiatives. Do you know anything about that, Nat? And is it on your priority list?
So what David might be referring to is HB, I believe it's 101, and this speaks to, so in the 2024 legislative session, legislators kind of gave themselves the power to write the ballot title and summary, etc. of constitutional amendments and other ballot questions. And this resulted in some really biased ballot language. That's part of the reason why Amendment D was voided by the Utah Supreme Court, found to be unconstitutional. It was so biased that voters couldn't even understand what they were voting on. So HB 101 actually requires that responsibility of writing those things for ballot questions to go back to the Office of Legislative and General Research Council, which is an impartial office. And so this is a bill that we do support. It's one that I didn't have a chance to mention in our earlier summary there, but yeah.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat that I'm going to give to Bonnie. Bonnie Dieta is concerned about education money going into vouchers. As a retired educator, what can she do about that?
Absolutely. So, as I said, a lot of what we're going to need to be doing to counter some of these bills is having a strong show of public and member support. So what I would recommend doing is right now, even before those bills are dropped, reach out to your representatives and your senators and tell your story. Tell them why it's important that we make sure that we make sure that unaccountable money is not diverted to private religious school vouchers in this state, and how important it is. I mean, 90% of our students of our children in Utah attend public school. So making sure that we're not diluting those funds at all, to make sure that we can provide quality education to Utah students is the priority. Again, I think we're kind of in a time right now where a lot of arguments are very individualistic. There's not a lot of, it only applies if it affects you in particular. So definitely think of some personal stories, and how the potential diluting of that funding from public education is going to affect individual families and individual children.
Thank you. Bonnie, another question for you, I think. Is there an effort to have school lunches being paid for by state taxes for every child?
You know
Is that
what?
something you know of?
I'm not sure. The food security amendments isn't one that I'm following personally. It's my colleague. But I can definitely look into that and find out for sure. I'm not positive on that.
Okay, thank you. Um, take one, well, maybe a couple more questions. Here's one that's in the weeds a little bit, if anybody knows. Specific budget requests. How do we track budget requests, i.e. funding for 3 investigators for adult protective services? Does anybody know appropriations requests? If not, I can take it. This is something on the website. If you go to le.utah.gov, which is the website for the legislature, and then you go to the bottom of the page, there's legislator request for appropriations. You click on that link and you'll be able to see every request that a lawmaker has made for a budget request. Last I looked, there was only one on there, but there might be more now. And I think the link was just dropped in the chat for that. Going back to vote by mail, and Nat, someone's trying to get a temperature check on legislators. Are there enough common sense or moderate Republicans who currently feel comfortable with vote by mail as it is and oppose changes, or is this going to be a sweep in the legislature?
It is sort of hard to answer that right now. We know that legislative leadership is able to put pressure on their colleagues. So even legislators who might feel that vote by mail has been good for their district might have that pressure put on them. However, I worry that some moderate legislators don't understand just how much of a difference this will make in the lives of people who, that's one less thing you need on your plate, is to have to go return your mail-in ballot in person while showing a government-issued ID on or before Election Day. So this is why it's really important to reach out to your legislators, even now before the bill has been filed, so that they understand that this is something that Utahns don't want. So to answer your question, it's hard to say whether this will sail or not, but I think there's still a lot of time left for us to bring our experiences to the forefront and slow it down.
Great, thank you. I think that's going to be time for a Q&A. Is there any last things that you would like to share with our attendees before we wrap up? Anyone?
I'll just share my two craziest bills so far.
Okay.
I always have a crazy list. I keep going. So these are sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, two bills. One, HB 233 just dropped last night, which is very specifically targeted at Planned Parenthood to ban Planned Parenthood from teaching sex education in Utah public schools. And then on the other end of the spectrum, a mandate in public schools. This is HB 104, sponsored by Rex Ship in the House, to mandate age appropriate, and I'll put that in quotes because I don't know what this looks like, gun training in schools starting in kindergarten. So there you have it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing those. I also have a crazy list that I keep on my tracker, which is titled, Why is this a bill? Anything else from any of our panelists that you'd like to share with our attendees before we wrap up?
I want to express just appreciation for everyone who took some time out of their Thursday to join. This is something that's really important, is to understand that there are other people who also care about your issues, to start to build community and power and understand where you can fit into the legislative process. So thanks so much for being here, for caring about this. We need your support, especially that in-person support as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone who hopped on this call. I appreciate everyone who is willing to engage with the session, whether it's our esteemed panelists and all the work they do up on the Hill lobbying for their organizations, or constituents who are trying to stay up to date on what's happening and involved. I'd like to make a plug once again for our bill tracker, betterutah.org. You can also sign up there for daily updates. We send out a daily update email on everything that happened on the Hill, as well as a schedule for the next day and action alerts. And I know there's so much other good information that organizations are putting out. So go follow Quality Utah, Stewardship Utah, Utah Education Association, and any of these other great nonprofits in our communities doing great work. Thank you again, and we'll see you after the next 45 days. Bye, everyone. Thank you.